Yeah.
Welcome back to the Gridiron Expert. Assuming the NCAA does not punish them before the season starts, expectations are very high for Arizona State. They have one of their best teams in years, and anything less than a division crown will be viewed as a disappointment. So again, guys, welcome back to the Gridiron Expert, here to predict and analyze Arizona State's schedule and record for this 2021 college football season. As always, make sure to continue to like, comment, subscribe, share our videos, and also make sure to check out everything down in that description below, including those brand new expert picks. All of our college football and NFL spread picks on our website, thegridironexpert.com. Make sure to go sign up for those today before the season starts, because I promise you, you're not going to want to miss out on any of them once the season starts. So let's take a look at Arizona State, guys. They've been in the news a lot recently. They have a lot of recruiting violations. They committed a lot of recruiting violations. Whether you agree with those or disagree with those, it still happened. And now they're under investigation from the NCAA. It's not looking good for the Sun Devils. How the NCAA chooses to punish Arizona State, for lack of better words, remains to be seen. As of this filming, we know nothing. If they go without it, if they choose not to do it until after the season or midway through the season, our predictions remain about the same. If they do it before the season starts, it could very well affect our predictions going forward. So it all depends on what comes of this NCAA investigation and how quickly the NCAA goes with it. And more likely, they'll take about 2 years to get the job done, so we shouldn't have too much to worry about. But something to keep your eye on for the Sun Devils as we progress through this offseason, as we approach college football in late August. But let's take a look at the Sun Devils again. Our predictions today will be based as if nothing is going to happen to Arizona State. They'll be based on as if nothing's going to happen, no punishments, no transfers, no coaches getting fired, no nothing. Just like everything's still intact. And we look at this offense right now, guys. Everything goes their way, they're going to have one of the best offenses in the conference. They averaged 40.2 points per game last year. They averaged 264.2 rushing yards per game last year. And again, take some of these numbers with a grain of salt, because Arizona State only played in 4 games. They went 2-2. 4 games, 2-2. And one of those wins was a 70-7 victory over Arizona. That's where a lot of these numbers got big boosts from that big-time offensive performance. But still, 264.2 rushing yards per game is still pretty ridiculous. They're led by Jaden Daniels, one of the best quarterbacks in the Pac-12, without a doubt one of the best quarterbacks in the country. Threw for over 700 yards and 5 touchdowns last year, just 1 interception. And in the 2 years that we've seen Daniels play, that's the one thing he does a phenomenal job of, is taking care of the football. He does not turn it over very often. Not to mention that on top of taking great care of the ball, being very accurate, he's a dual-threat quarterback, rushed for over 200 yards and 4 touchdowns last year. The run game, though, which is something that Arizona State's going to harp on, something they're going to focus on, is led by Rachaad White. And they're going to run the ball a lot this year. And again, take the numbers with a grain of salt. White only had 42 carries in 2020, but he had 420 yards, which means he was averaging 10 yards per carry in 2020. He has 4 offensive linemen returning up front. Daniels will be protected. The lanes will be available for their running backs. Arizona State's offense should maybe even get better than they were last year. The same can be said for their defense. Many believe this is one of the best defenses that Arizona State's had in decades. They returned just about everybody on this defensive side of the ball, from the number 1 scoring defense in the Pac-12 last year, allowing just 23.2 points per game. Their secondary is going to be extremely strong with Chase Lucas and Evan Fields, and their defensive line is bolstered by Tyler Johnson, who had 5 sacks in 2020. It very well could be the best in decades. They're going to need it to be if they want to win the South. We take a look at Arizona State's schedule, guys. Let's predict it. We're going to go ahead and chalk up 2 quick victories with a win over Southern Utah and a win over UNLV. Neither of those 2 teams should really challenge Arizona State in this game, or in those first 2 games, and Arizona State should cruise to those, rest up before their first true challenge on the road at BYU in Week 3. They travel to Provo, and as we know, that's not an easy place to play. It's not an easy place to play. BYU, period, is not an easy team to play, regardless of who's there and who's not. And as we all know, BYU loses a lot of talent from that 11-1 squad we saw last year. They lose Zach Wilson. They lose their top wide receiver in Dax Milne. They lose 3 offensive linemen. They actually lose the most offensive production in the country. They have the least amount of production returning out of any team in the entire country. Now the Cougars will be battle tested. Arizona State will coast in their first 2 games. By this point, BYU will have already played Arizona and Utah, 2 teams within the Pac-12. So there's something to be said for that, having been tested maybe in a couple close games. They get this game in Provo. But when I look at BYU, guys, when you really mark it down on paper, Arizona State owns the edge in pretty much all areas of the game. They own the quarterback edge. Zach Wilson's gone. Jaden Daniels owns that advantage. I would venture to say that, yes, Rachaad White maybe owns a slight edge over Tyler Algier in this BYU rushing attack. Arizona State, I believe, is going to own the slight edge on the offensive line, or actually the big edge on the offensive line. And they certainly own that defensive edge as well. Everything is in favor of Arizona State in this game with the exception of home field advantage. They have enough to overcome that. They beat BYU. They're 3-0. They then get into conference play. Starts off with Colorado at the end of September. Now, Colorado is a game where Arizona State has to focus primarily on stopping the run. That is something they're going to have to focus on. And Arizona State allowed 183.2 rushing yards per game last year. And that's not a good mark. That's a number that really needs to improve. For a defense that has this much potential, they have to improve strictly on stopping the run. And they're going to have to do that against Colorado if they want to beat the Buffaloes. Because Colorado is a team that averaged over 200 rushing yards per game last year. Now they have a dual-threat quarterback in Brendan Lewis. They have 2 great running backs in Jarrett Broussard and Alex Fontenot. And their defense is one that's extremely underrated. The Buffaloes surprised a lot of people in year 1 under Carl Durrell. Now, we're not saying they're going to be a South title contender in 2021. For the full schedule, things are going to be drastically different. But Colorado will be competitive. And that's something that you really couldn't say for the majority of the time they've been in the Pac-12, with the exception of a few years. Arizona State will win this game against the Buffaloes. They allowed 181.4 rushing yards per game. Rachaad White, Jaden Daniels, the whole 9 yards, should run all over the Buffaloes here, but don't be surprised if it's close for a while. Arizona State escapes September undefeated. They're 4-0, and they get a major trap game on October 2nd when they face off against UCLA. This is huge, 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 guys, because this, to me, it's ripe for an upset. Arizona State is ripe for an upset here. Undefeated, first game of October. They're starting to get into the thick of things. They lost to UCLA 25-18 last year, so they fell by a touchdown to the Bruins. And you look at this UCLA squad, a team that showed major improvement under Chip Kelly last year and now returns 19 starters. 19 starters back for UCLA. That includes 10 on defense. They got a dual-threat quarterback in Dorian Thompson-Robinson. He has all his weapons basically coming back. And the defense is loaded in terms of experience. The downfall for UCLA, though, is while you have so much experience coming back, the question is how much will they improve? UCLA gave up 274.1 passing yards per game last year. That ranked 114th in the nation. If that number doesn't improve, and I don't know if it can by just 4 or 5 games into the season, UCLA is going to be in a world of hurt facing one of the best quarterbacks in the conference. I think Jaden Daniels has a big game in this one. Maybe you don't see Arizona State run the ball as much in this one, maybe not have as much success running the ball. They're going to have success airing it out in this game. I believe they beat UCLA at the Rose Bowl, but barely. This game is one where I will not be surprised in the slightest if UCLA wins this game. But we're going to go with the team that we think as a whole is better, and that is Arizona State. They then go back home and take on Stanford. And we've mentioned it all throughout these Pac-12 predictions. We don't know what to expect out of Stanford. We don't know what to expect. They are going to be very solid defensively. A team that actually finished the year on, a 4-game winning streak? So they carry a little bit of momentum into 2021. The defense returns 8 starters. We know the back 7, especially that linebacking core and secondary, that's the key to secondary, is going to be very, very strong. How they are up front on the defensive line and how they are offensively with Jack West as quarterback remains to be seen. And I think ultimately in some of these games, that's going to be their downfall. Stanford has the defense, but if the defense gets worn down because their offense can't get anything going, they're not going to be able to produce the wins. I don't have that much faith in Stanford's offense right now. West will get there. Their running game improved last year and will get there. But Arizona State has everything needed defensively to win this game, and they will at home. They are 6-0 going into the road game at Utah. The road game at Utah. Now, this is another major trap game, guys. Everybody is talking so much about USC and Arizona State as the top 2 teams in the Pac-12 South. No one is talking about the Utes. No one's talking about Utah, a team that was almost a playoff member 2 years ago. They win the Pac-12 championship 2 years ago for Oregon. They're in the college football playoff, and we've just kind of forgotten about them. But when you look at Utah, they returned 18 starters. They landed one of the most coveted quarterback transfers in Charlie Brewer from Baylor. He's going to be under center for them this year. They have great running backs across the board. They've got a solid offensive line, great defensive line. Utah was 11th in the nation last year in stopping the run, allowing just 107.8 rushing yards per game. And that number right there is why we're going to pick the Utes to hand Arizona State their first loss. Arizona State wants to run the ball. Again, 264.2 rushing yards per game. They're not going to replicate that. We know that. Those are Army, Navy, Air Force type numbers, and that's not going to happen this year. But they have the talent to continue to run it and run it successfully until they meet their match in Utah. Utah's going to have one of the best running defenses again in the country this year, and they will have enough to stop Arizona State, especially with the game being in Salt Lake City. Home field advantage playing a major role across the board for every single team in the country this year. So Arizona State goes in their bye week with a sour taste in their mouth. They have their first loss, but their conference title hopes are not over yet. It's only one conference loss. They're not going to own the tiebreaker over Utah, though, if that's needed. They get the bye week. They play Washington State. I think they take easy care of the Cougars. Chalk it up as a win. Washington State will improve in year 2 under Nick Rolovich. We know that. Jaden DeLora is he's a budding star. He's on the rise. Great quarterback. It's going to be great to engineer that run and shoot offense that Rolovich is running in Pullman. But Washington State's downfall is their defense. They allowed 307 passing yards per game. This game reminds me a lot of the UCLA game we just talked about. You know, the offense might be there for Washington State just like it is for UCLA, but the defense may not be. UCLA had a horrible secondary. Washington State had an even worse secondary. Jaden Daniels, with a week of rest at home, airs it out, wins the game big. They defeat the Cougars. They then play USC. That's the big one. This is the game that could determine the Pac-12 South. This is the game that could determine the division. Very well could. And Arizona State's very, very lucky to be getting the Trojans at home. Now you look at what happened last year. Arizona State lost to USC 28-27. The Sun Devils led by 13. The Sun Devils led by 13 with under 3 minutes left and managed to lose that game. They have a sour taste in their mouth from that. This game's been circled on their calendar for a long time. Not just to get revenge for the way things happened last year, but because they know the importance of this game. And like we just mentioned with Utah a second ago, home field advantage is going to play such a key role, especially for some of the biggest teams and for some of the biggest games of the year. And this is absolutely a game that fits both of those categories. I believe that Arizona State does, in fact, beat USC. I believe their secondary, guys, is just that good. USC wants to air it out with Keaton Slovis, the air raid offense under Graham Harrell. They have the quarterback and the wide receivers to do just that. But Arizona State has the secondary to match them step for step. And they have the offense, I believe, to match them step for step. Not many teams can keep up with a high-octane offense like USC. Arizona State can. If it turns into a shootout, they've got it. But they've got home field advantage, and I think they've got the defensive advantage too. And they're going to beat the Trojans to start November. And just like that, they might catapult themselves to number 1 in the Pac-12 South standings. Again, depending on what happens with Utah. They won't own the advantage over the Utes, but they will own the tiebreaker over the Trojans in what will be one of the bigger wins of the year. Maybe one of the bigger wins in recent memory for Arizona State. They then travel on the road to take on Washington. Now, this is a trap game if I've ever seen one. This is a trap game if I've ever seen one, guys, because here's the thing. It's interesting how this works out for both teams. Washington is coming off a game against Oregon. The Huskies host Oregon and then host Arizona State in back-to-back weeks. So the Huskies, depending on what happens against the Ducks, could find themselves atop the Pac-12 North standings. Arizona State, with the win against USC, could find themselves at the top of the South standings. Both teams could be very high after a win. Both teams could be very low after a loss. Or it could be a case like right here, where we predicted Washington to fall to Oregon. We predicted Arizona State to beat USC. Arizona State now travels on the road high after a win against USC, and it's that classic letdown game. There's all those possibilities that can be mixed in there for this game up in Seattle. When you look at Washington, they return just about everybody, and they're going to have one of the best defenses in the country. Certainly in the Pac-12, but in the country. They had the number 1 passing defense within the Pac-12 last year. They allowed just 185 passing yards per game. And I believe by this point at the season, Washington will have figured out any offensive struggles they may have. That's the biggest question for Jimmy Lake's squad. By November 13th, they're going to figure that out. Washington wants to run the ball. Arizona State's rushing defense, a little suspect. Whoever's at quarterback is going to find his receivers. He's going to find his guy. He's going to find his groove by this point. I think Arizona State does hit that classic letdown game. Big win over USC. Now got to travel north to Seattle. Washington, I said, is going to beat one of Oregon or Arizona State. They get both of them at home in consecutive weeks. They're not losing both. That win is going to cover the Sun Devils, and that could be the final blow to knock Arizona State out of the conference title race if Utah or USC at this point is doing extremely well. They play Oregon State on the road after that. Again, cannot afford to overlook this game. You're disappointed. You're hungover after a crushing loss at Washington. Don't fall to the Beavers, a team that Arizona State beat 46-33 last year. So a shootout. I expect the defense to be a lot better for the Sun Devils in this game. So I don't think they're going to see Oregon State drop 33 points on them. The offensive talent is certainly there to do that. I don't think Arizona State allows it. And at the end of the day, it comes down to Oregon State's defense for me. And I don't think they're going to have enough to stop Arizona State in this rushing attack. Oregon State had a terrible rushing defense last year, allowed over 200 rushing yards per game. Arizona State will exploit that. Rachaad White will exploit that. They go on the road to beat an Oregon State team that, look, we don't have very high expectations for. A lot of people are going to hate us for that. They're going to be a team that by season's end, you're going to say, man, they were a lot better than their final record indicated. Just a very tough schedule. So they beat Oregon State, and they round out the year with a game against Arizona. We mentioned earlier they defeated the Sun Devils 70-7 in 2020. 70-7 in 2020. The Sun Devils have won 4 straight over their in-state rival. 3 of those 4 have been won by double digits, make it 4 of the last 5. Arizona State will win this game. The Wildcats are just in a very bad spot right now. Tough schedule, new coach, inexperience at quarterback. They've got Don Brown as defensive coordinator. That might be the only saving grace for them this year, but they don't have much defensive talent. Arizona State will literally, once again, run all over them, and they're going to finish the season at 10-2. A double-digit win season for Herm Edwards and the Sun Devils. It's going to bump them up there to 10-2, potentially in a New Year's Six bowl game. But the 2 losses come in conference play. And that might keep them out of the Pac-12 championship game. Might prevent them from winning the South. Again, depending on what USC does the rest of the way, depending on what Utah does the rest of the way. So Sun Devil fans, you might not get to that Pac-12 championship like you want, but you're going to get a double-digit win season. And that's still pretty dang good. Again, assuming you can avoid the NCAA at least for a few more months. So guys, as always, thank you so much for watching us here at The Gridiron Expert on YouTube. Make sure to continue to like, comment, subscribe, share our videos, and also make sure to check out everything down in that description below, including those expert picks. Make sure to sign up for those today before the season begins. You do not want to miss out on any of those picks, both college and NFL. And once again, guys, as always, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time right here on The Gridiron Expert.